Welcome to A Better HR Business, the podcast that looks at how HR consultants and HR tech firms grow their businesses and how they help their employers to get the best out of their people. Remember, for show notes and downloads, go to www.getmorehrclients.com/podcast. That's getmorehrclients.com/podcast. Okay, let's get started.
Welcome back to the show. Great to have you along. And I'm really looking forward to today's conversation with Doug C. Brown. Doug is the CEO of CEO Sales Strategies, which is a business that focuses on helping individual business owners and corporates dealing with unpredictable sales revenue growth. And they do that by helping businesses predictably grow their revenue by implementing a predictable, reliable, measurable math-based model for sales revenue growth, which helps businesses overcome the uncertainty of fluctuating sales. Obviously a huge thing, but firstly, before we get into all of that, Doug, thank you very much for joining me today. I really appreciate it.
Ben, thanks for having me here. I'm very grateful.
Yeah, great to have you. And whereabouts are you based?
I am in New Hampshire in the United States. For those of you who are like, where's New Hampshire? Because a lot of people don't know where it is. Think Boston, and I'm about 42 minutes out of the center of Boston.
Nice. That's Robert Frost country, I think. Is that right?
I believe so.
Yes, excellent. So can you describe or walk us through the pillars in the Double Your Sales methodology?
Yeah. So firstly, when people hear doubling your sales, I want people to understand that a lot of people don't want to double their sales spend. Conceptually, they think it's like, let me try that, but really they don't. What they're really looking for is predictable revenue growth with sanity. They want their operations humming along. They don't want to have 40, tasks every day on their back. They don't want to be stressed out. They want to live a quality of life. And whether it's a large corporation or even a single, solo entrepreneur, they tend to all want the same thing. So I want everybody to understand, even though we developed a math-based formula that you can double your sales, it's really a math-based formula that is about creating predictable revenue. So if you wanted to say a 37% bump in your revenue this year, we can dial it in mathematically and we can tell you all the metrics that you should be doing and what proportion they'll be doing. So, step number one really is, and some of these have sort of evolved over time, Ben, so that's why I'm giving that information. Step number one really is getting a truthful goal. If we don't have a truthful goal, we don't really know the game we're supposed to play. And it's crazy. According to Harvard University, only 17% of actual businesses have a committed goal.
Do you mean a defined revenue target or?
Defined revenue target, why they're doing it, what they're looking to get out of it. Some define, say, a revenue target. If they're a company, they want market share, let's say. They want to grow some market share. And why do they want to grow the market share, right? Maybe so they're a publicly traded company and they want to drive the stock price up because why do they want to drive the stock price up? Well, I don't know, the CEO's got 2 million shares and he or she wants that share price to go up and they want to be able to sell some of that stock off. So there's always reasons why. The challenge is most people are not very clear on why. And so the first step that we always do, and I would tell you that, out of our clientele, about 9% of them actually have committed goals. Now they'll all set them in January, right? They'll all be like, oh yeah, January 1st, like, woo, New Year's. But they're not committed goals. And so what's the difference? Let's say somebody wants to grow by, pick a number, $5 million. And we say to them, okay, here's your $5 million plan. And they're a $2.5 million company. We're going to double your business. Well, this is going to be required. This is going to be required. That's going to be required. This is going to happen, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And they go like this. Geez, I wasn't expecting to have to do all that. Well, that's what it takes to do it. But, what if we don't hit 5 million and we only hit 3.5? And they go like this. I think that would be okay too. Well, it's not a $5 million committed goal at that point, because what we're looking to hear back is, oh, no. 5 million, that's it, right? So number one, committed goal. It's interesting you're asking me this question, Ben, because I was just writing a presentation on this for the last day, actually. So number two is not having the math. So this is a subset of what you probably have already seen.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Not having the math actually correct for that goal. A lot of companies, for example, they don't figure in what their churn rate is, what their refund rate is. And so, especially when we're dealing with solo entrepreneurs, they very rarely figure this in. So it's like, all right, I need this many sales at this price to get to this revenue goal. Well, what about the cost per sale? What about the refund rate? What about the churn rate?
Or at which month they join, if it's a recurring payment thing. If they join
Exactly.
the 12th month, that's not 12 months of revenue.
No, not at all. You got 1 month of revenue, right? So unless they pay in full, right? And then out of that 12 months of recurring, let's say they only go 4 months. What percentage of people go and drop? They may not ask for a refund, but they just drop. There's churn. So we have to figure in all of those metrics, because let's say that somebody says, I need 100 sales to hit that. Well, it might be 120 to actually hit that number, depending on what they want to net out of that. So step number 3, build a metrics-based plan. So there are 11 metrics in total, but there's 8 core metrics. So when we look at the metrics, for example, what are the outbound reaches that are going out? In other words, how many leads we got coming in, right? In or out? What's the actual connection rate when we're reaching out? I had a client, for example, who reached out to almost 200 people and not one response. And when we looked at his connection rate, he was doing email marketing at that time. Not one email made it through. They all got pulled off into spam.
Spammed and yeah.
Right? So you can have a lot of outbound and nobody even seeing it, right? So once we get to that outbound, where we can see the connection rate, then we want to know what the response rate is, and particularly the positive responses. Then from there, we want to know how many appointments are we setting. And a subset of that is how many appointments are actually being kept. Yeah, I had another client who went out to 2 trade shows and they collected, I think it was 112 leads, if I remember correctly. 112 people. And out of the 112 people at the trade show, 60 of them said, I'm taking an appointment, and scheduled an appointment. So they were like, wow, we got, 50%. Out of those 60 appointments, 2 showed up. So what can you deduce from that? I can tell them right now, they're talking to the wrong buyer with the wrong message, or they're talking to the right buyer with the wrong message, or the wrong buyer with the right message, right? But which it would be the wrong message. And it turned out that they were talking to the wrong buyer with the wrong message. So they were looking for CEOs of companies, but they were talking to people who were manning, I don't mean that as a sexist way, womaning, I don't know how you call that, trade show booths. Well, the CEO wasn't there.
They're not going to be doing that. Yeah.
They're not doing that. Right. So they're talking to middle line managers at best, who then have to go to the CEO or whoever, the next level up, and say, oh, I found this great thing. Let's talk about it. And they go, nah, we don't have budget for it right now, that type of thing. And so they didn't take the calls. So those are the first 4 metrics. I mean, once we understand what the appointments are, how many closes we getting, how many closes on follow-up we getting, how are we expanding the sale, how many new clients are we spawning out of that, for example, how many referrals we getting, all these metrics must be measured. And the cool part is, Ben, when you dial in these metrics, they compound on one another.
Absolutely.
So we build a math-based metrics plan. Then from there, we're going out and we're calling it massive prospecting. Not a sexy name, but it's really what it is, right?
Taking action.
Yeah, because you can have the best plan in the world. The information's great, but if we don't act or implement it, what do we get? It's like saying, I got 2 PhDs and you never applied for a job. Okay, well, great. You're an educated person, right? So I know people have got multiple PhDs and, they can't build a business, and they're like, well, why? And I'm like, because you keep thinking you're a PhD. You're in the business of making sales. And I have nothing against education. I got 3 degrees myself. So all of you people will go, no, don't pick on the PhDs. No, I'm not. I'm really not. But massive prospecting is so important. And now, whether you have a marketing department or prospecting, we like to focus on prospecting because it's outbound activity. And we like to focus on things that actually require a conversation. Because when you can talk to a human being, you can get a lot faster close times than you can if you're just talking to electronic something. So the reason behind that is because the master prospector will always outsell the master closer.
Just because of sheer numbers, or what reason?
Well, the master prospector dials in not just leads, but sales qualified leads, right? And so once we dial in that process, and we do this through what we call in our world CPM, which is the ideal right fit buyer. So we're going to, in between all of the metrics and this prospecting side, we're going to dial in that ideal right fit buyer. Now, the ideal right fit buyer, like some of the people who understand marketing, you're going to have a lead. Then the next step up would be you get a marketing qualified lead or, marketing ready lead, that type of thing. Well, Salespeople don't want those.
That's the great disconnect between marketing and sales. Look, we gave you so many MQLs, and then the salespeople, no, I want an SQL, a sales call.
That's exactly what they want. And preferred, sales ready lead. So qualified means we're in the ballpark to have this discovery conversation, but what they really want is they already got budget. They're already in the stage of it. They haven't really talked to other people about it. We're the first. Really, what salespeople are looking for is purchase order ready leads. That's what they're really looking for, right? But that's a little unrealistic. Marketing leads can be nurtured up, and there is a point where it's like, oh, okay, this does belong with the sales team at this point, or a salesperson. The challenge for most marketers, they produce MQLs, right? They're marketing qualified. And then they're like, well, the salespeople can't close it, or they close a lower percentage. Well, there's a reason for it. They're actually not sales ready. But the master prospector, Ben, will be able to produce sales ready leads, or at least sales qualified leads, right? And they'll learn how to do this in a mass volume. And that's why they can outclose the closer, because the closer might be getting marketing qualified leads or just leads or a few sales ready leads here and there. And that person who can produce those type of quality leads, it's like you're in a desert, somebody walks through the desert, they've been there, walking for 3 days, you have water, they got gold in their pockets, they're going to pay you for the water, right? It's that easy. You don't have to convince them, persuade them, and have an alternate choice close and all the stuff that closers revere.
It's like the old hot dog analogy, isn't it? The story of, where do you want a hot dog stall? Do you want it on a quiet street or outside the baseball stadium at the end of the game, as people are pouring out?
And preferably, you want to be on that hot dog stand when they're pouring in and out of the game on a day that all the restaurants have been closed down and they haven't eaten yet.
We've been working through the methodology, so the WSL methodology, and we're talking about prospecting. Before I get into that, you reminded me of the MQLs, so the marketing qualified lead versus an SQL. So we did a lot of Facebook ads, right? But there's a thing that you can do where you can have a lead form on Facebook, and that will always get you lots of people putting in their name and email address, but they'll never buy. Their conversion rate's really, really small. So that's an example of where you might be fishing in the wrong pond and not necessarily having SQL. So you got to think about that process. But two things around the prospecting. One is, you hear about this dream list. Build up your list of 50 companies you love to work with or would love to sell to, etc. So I guess it's how to approach that. And then secondly, maybe you could share some advice on best methods or methodology for having built up that lead list or target list, how you'd contact them. Is that the LinkedIn? Is it email, etc.?
Well, it depends on who the right fit buyer is. So we used to build commission-only sales teams for companies. And I had criteria for the sales team that they had to make $250,000 or more on their own. And they had to have at least built a $5 million company by themselves with their own team, or been involved in a larger build as a principal building it. Because we were dealing with business-to-business CEOs and business owners. And I wanted somebody who could relate. And people are making $250,000 or more. They're generally hanging out in different places than people who are making, say, $80,000 a year. Doesn't mean they're a better quality person, right? And so if you wanted $1 million person, you're not going to find them usually in a local bar. You know what I mean? Occasionally you will. So that's where, somebody goes, oh, I got a great lead, well, of course, you looked enough in those type of areas, you'll find somebody. But what we want to do is we want to go to, say, the country clubs. We want to go to the places that you've got to pay $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 a year to be part of. And you're going to find lots of people there because that's who's there, those type of people, right? So when we used to recruit our sales team members, we would go to those type of places. We would be in, what we would call swanky places. And, we'd find them in New York or we'd find them in Boston. There was a restaurant called the Top of the Hub. It was on the 52nd floor of the Prudential building. They went and drank there. So that's the first thing. So, best advice is go where they are.
If I swing to the prospecting side of things, what do you see that's working? Because I know people listening to this will be going, what can I do to increase my lead flow and prospecting access or success?
Well, it's the number one question. Probably the question you get asked the most is certainly the question I get asked the most, right? And usually what's happening is they're frustrated because they've been trying things and it's not working. So to answer their question, I'll go back to the same point. Who do you want? Get very clear on that. Because if you're looking for, ping pong champions, for example, right? You don't go to usually Wimbledon because they're playing tennis. Now, could there be a ping pong champion in the audience or in the clubhouse? Sure. But you're better off hanging around where ping pong champions hang out, which is the answer to their question. Where are your ideal right fit buyers hanging out? What do they read? What do they do? This is crazy, but we were recruiting bungee jumpers at one point for salespeople. And the reason behind that is we needed somebody with a very high self-confidence. So where do you go find bungee jumpers? Well, believe it or not, they have bungee jumping clubs. They actually have groups online. They also tend to be into martial arts.
So that's understanding your target audience, your target market, understand who they are, what they want, what they do.
Right. So once you understand that, Ben, now what do they read? What do they listen to? What do they subscribe to? Check out their profiles online. There's a LinkedIn profile, a Facebook profile, an Instagram profile. There's something on Twitter, whatever. There's something out there. You can analyze what they're saying and you can figure out where and what kind of methodology that they look for. So for example, if you're trying to get to a business to consumer, unlikely they're going to be, unless they work for a company that they need a LinkedIn profile, unlikely they're going to be active on LinkedIn. We must look at what the methodology is that lines up with where they are and what they're consuming. And when you look through their profile, folks, if you see words like, it was ringing in my ears, I was hearing that person very clearly, and they're using a lot of, say, auditory dominant words, they're going to want a phone call because they want to hear. So there's clues in the language they have. This is kind of a deeper subject, but there's clues in the language. Some people are kinesthetic learners. Some people are visual learners. I see what you're saying, Ben, right? They'll be using language like that, or they'll be putting, visuals up on, the sunset is, rising over the hill. And can you see that, point down here? Like they'll be using stuff like that. Or kinesthetic learners would say the sunset's rising over the hill, So language patterns will reveal these things too. Now, this is kind of very deep, if you will, but it's accurate, right? So you can figure that out. If they're constantly visual, you want to give them something visual. So email might work really well. Pictures would even work better. But that's what you want to do because there's no blanket answer for that. It's not like all accountants are reading their email only. It's not that way. So it depends on what you're looking for. And by the way, folks, if you're like, this makes sense, find out where they congregate. Go there. Network with them. Rub elbows. Rub shoulders, as they say, right?
In the HR world, we have boom bust economies. And then in boom times when the labor market is tight, when there's a skill shortage, then suddenly all employers talk about, we can't find and hire good people. And at that point, they say, well, what can we do about, attraction and retention and employer branding? And as I would say to them with an HR hat on, it's a bit late then to start then. So you were talking earlier about having a plan in place, but then you got to take action. And I think when you're talking about people asking you a lot, and yes, they'd ask me a lot too about how do we get more leads, more prospecting happening. For me, it is that plan, but it's putting it into action. So doing all that research, understand the target market, the ideal buyer, where they are, what do they talk about, where do they hang out, do they like to go to martial arts, etc. But then going there or making the calls. So you're talking about having a great idea of the people and then actually taking action. Is that right?
Well, if no action, no result. Well, you get a result. Inaction is an action, right? But, you brought up an excellent point, right? For the people who are, hey, I can't find HR people, right? Well, the reason you can't find HR people is because you haven't been consistently prospecting for HR people. You don't wait till a dry spell happens before you try to go find water, right? You want to know where the water is consistently so that when water supplies get short, you know where to go because there'll still be water there for you to drink. I mean, if you think about that analogy, folks, how long can you go without water, right? A while, but you don't want to. How long can you go without air? Think about it that way, right? Not very long. So, your point is it is late. And what ends up happening is when we don't have a consistent prospecting plan going on for people that we're actually looking for, We don't have the relations. And so this is a big challenge in the sales world in general because people don't follow up with people. People don't stay in touch with people. They drop the ball on this. And some of their best relationships come from referrals from people who like, know, and trust them. And so if we're not doing that, then that's why I built this follow-up software we built, right? Because it's insane to me that people go to these events, they meet people, and very few people get in touch with them. About 13% of people actually contact one another after an event.
Or if they do, what happens is they are joining a whole bunch of other people, sending hundreds of messages on the Monday after the conference was on a Friday. And so suddenly these prospects are receiving emails just pouring into their inbox. And so your message is forgotten. But I think what you're saying is that follow-up is so important because, well, once you've sent that message, you don't stop there because it's just been lost in a sea of inbound messages. So you got to do something about it, right?
When I was growing up, everybody sent a Christmas card, right? It was just something that you did. No matter, who you were, what you were. I mean, you would send Christmas cards to the people that celebrated Christmas. Even if you were Jewish, you would still send a Christmas card to someone else, right? Even if you don't celebrate Christmas. So, when you're getting 60 Christmas cards and then you get one more, it's like, oh, well, okay, well, I got another Christmas card, right? So you got to be able to stand out. And I will tell people this over and over, and people don't take this advice. Some do. Pick the phone up and call them. In business, people expect that you want to talk. The crazy part, Ben, is like somebody who's pursuing somebody for a sale, statistics clearly show that before they disengage, the average person buying wants 3 to 5 contacts, and 3 of those are phone calls.
What do you do with the whole COVID and remote work and hybrid stuff so that people are not necessarily at their office next to a phone?
Yeah. Look, here's the thing. You can still get a hold of people. It just takes you a little bit more effort. So you want to have multimodality if one modality is not working. But don't negate making a phone call. You can pick CEOs up early in the morning. The crazy part, people won't get up. They won't call at 6:30 in the morning. And guess where most CEOs are there? And guess what? They're not busy.
It's a bit of an excuse to not take that action, I guess.
Yeah, CEOs and business owners many times are there on Saturday mornings. So call, right? Because guess what? They pick the phone up. Hello. And boom, you got them. And they're usually more receptive because they're not being, pulled left and right throughout the day. And you are interrupting them in the morning, but it's not the same where they just got out of 3 board meetings and 2 of them were kind of, a hassle and, they're not really in a good mood and, the P&L's off and the purchase orders didn't come through for this or whatever, that's business, right? So things happen. But yeah, so always mix it up, but always have some component. There's no better marketing than human-to-human connection.
You're absolutely right. You've gone and given us some wonderful advice and insights around sales revenue and sales growth, which I thank you very much. If people want to learn more about what you do and how you can help, or if they just want to learn more about you and CEO sales strategies, the business in general, what should they do next?
Well, they can reach out to me directly, Doug at ceosalesstrategies.com. That's my email address. They can reach out to me on LinkedIn, Doug Brown 1234. They can call the company phone number or they can call my cell phone number, either text me, Please do not text me with offers. That's the only thing I ask. Hey, do you want SEO help or you want this, right? 832 in the United States. So a 1 plus 832-549-4836 is the phone number. And if they want to evaluate how they're doing on their prospecting and how they're doing on their sales, I have a gift, which we call the checklist, but it's really a deep dive audit on how they're doing. A lot of great feedback on this one, Ben, because people have said, geez, I didn't know I was missing out on this or I had that. They can get that at ceosalesstrategies, plural.com and /checklist. And they'll be able to put their name and email in and pick up the checklist.
So if you're listening to this on the go, we'll have the details in the show notes, but otherwise ceosalesstrategies.com and then /checklist if you'd like the checklist itself.
Yeah, please do not write this down while you're driving down the freeway, highway, whatever. Please do not.
And also, if you decide you want to phone Doug, he has told you here live that you do not need to text him first. So he's not.
No, I don't. Just call me.
I love it. Doug, Thank you very much. I really appreciate you sharing these insights and ideas. And I think they'll be very helpful to people. So I really appreciate it. And I wish you the best for the future.
Hey, Ben, thank you so much. I wish the best for you as well. And thank you for having me on your show and being such a gracious host.
Thanks.
Thanks for joining us today on A Better HR Business, the podcast that explores the world of HR consulting and HR tech businesses. For show notes and downloads, go to www.getmorehrclients.com/podcast. That's getmorehrclients.com/podcast. Remember to subscribe and share the show with any friends who are busy growing a HR business. Thanks and see you next time.